that sets you up to pitch an idea to James Cameron. And that makes you stand out too. That is what every person who's designing must always remember.
What were some of the times that your career where things didn't work out the way you wanted and expected them to?
That's a great question, because that's the majority of my career. Most of what we do every single day is fail, but fail is the path to success. I became a creature designer because of these guys.
Ever wondered who designs the creatures in your favorite movies? Welcome to The Mo Method, where we talk to creators who have turned their passions into professions. Today's guest is Neville Page, a legendary concept designer behind some of Hollywood's most iconic creatures. From the aliens in Star Trek to the amazing visuals in Avatar to the aliens in Prometheus and Cloverfield, Neville's work has shaped the way we think of otherworldly beings on screen. This episode is a deeply personal one for me as well. Neville was the reason I pursued a career in the entertainment industry. His work specifically lit the spark that set me down this path. So getting the chance to sit down and have this conversation is one that I'll never forget. I'd also be remiss not to mention Neville's Kickstarter campaign launches today. It's for his long-awaited book, Beauty in the Beast, and I've linked it in the show notes. If you're a fan of his work, this is one you do not want to miss. Whether you're an artist, a film fan, or just curious about what it takes to build a legendary career, this episode is for you.
Hello, my name is Neville Page. I'm a concept designer in the film and entertainment industry.
Let's jump right in. Where did it all start for you? What was kind of the pivotal moment that you kind of decided oh, this is what I want to do?
Well, I have been fortunate. It all comes down to support in your interests, support from your family when you're young. My dad has been a professional musician, drummer, percussionist almost all his life. And my mother, for a good period of her life, she was a dancer, ballet, and theater in the UK. So because of that, it would only make sense that they would be potentially supportive of my interest in entertainment. It could also be the opposite. They could have had their experience and be like, don't become an entertainer, whatever that means. And I think actually the fact that I wasn't pursuing being a musician and I wasn't pursuing being a dancer made it more supportive, more easily to support from their point of view. However, when I was about 12, I absolutely wanted to be a dancer, like Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire. That was what I truly wanted to do. And there was a movie out at the time called That's Entertainment, and it was just basically a portfolio of all the greatest musicals ever, from the early 20s to 70s. And boy, that movie had a profound impact on me. But so did The Exorcist and Jaws and other types of movies at the time, Close Encounters. And then Star Wars came out. And then I was like, game over. That is what I want to do. But I wasn't aware of creature design. I loved the cantina scene. I loved all the characters, but I just loved the look of Star Wars. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And my only awareness of if you're going to be involved in it, I thought you had to be an actor. So it wasn't until 1983 that I kind of figured that, I guess I should move back to California. I was living in Chicago at the time, and pursue being an actor, because then if I'm an actor, I get to be like Mark Hamill or Harrison Ford and wear the cool costumes, have a blaster, and be on set. So that was kind of the motivation to get into film, which was completely misdirected. But I got to work on films in a very peripheral way. I was on General Hospital for a little bit, which was like my biggest claim to fame, which was microscopic. Mostly I worked as a waiter in LA.
Like most LA journeys.
Yeah. And that's a very important experience to have had. I did come out here with the intention of being a good artist as an actor. I didn't come out to LA to become famous. with that mindset, I went to a school called the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and studied and really wanted to be good at it. Then, of course, you got to get work, preferably paying work. And I found that I was just not getting work. I was working as a waiter and I wasn't in control of my craft. And I did not like that. And that's no different than so many actors today still. It's just kind of the nature of the business. It's sort of the nature of the business I'm in anyhow as a designer now. But I did pursue it for a bit, but then I realized, having been in front of the camera, I looked at all the stuff behind the camera and thought, that's kind of what I really prefer.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I quit, which is almost arrogant to say. It's like, I quit being an actor. Did I ever start? I lived in Pasadena at the time, and there was a school called the Art Center College of Design. And I thought, that's where I recall a few of the artists who worked on Star Wars, who designed the stuff for Star Wars. That's where they went to school, that in Long Beach State. And so when I went to the school to kind of look at the gallery, that was it. I realized, that's what I wanted to do. I want to become a designer who's able to create these characters and worlds, etc. And that education was called industrial design. Ralph McQuarrie, who everyone should know, was an illustrator, not an industrial designer. Joe Johnson, who also everyone should know, was an industrial designer, pretty sure. Nilo Rodis Jamero, also another artist on Star Wars, industrial designer. And I thought, that's got to be what I should do. So I became an industrial designer. And in the process of becoming educated and getting a degree specific to product design, my roommate, Scott Robertson, who I'll dare say everyone should also know, he's an incredible designer. He and I decided to start a consulting firm up in San Francisco. So we're in LA. We got our degree. We move up to San Francisco. Why there? We had both done internships up in San Francisco. So we sort of had clients, and it made sense to us that, well, that's probably where we can start our design consulting business. And we did just that. We set out to do it. We got investors involved with our proposed company, and we became legit consultants to the medical field, ambulatory aids, wheelchairs specifically, oxygen therapy, baby incubators, beds, all that kind of stuff, bicycle gear, helmets, protective gear. All this relates to this journey. And so after having done that for a few years, we then were given the opportunity to teach what we learned at school and had practiced professionally, but at the Art Center sister campus in Vevey, Switzerland. And just getting an opportunity to go there and teach for a semester or two is incredible. But it turned out to be almost a couple years that we were in Switzerland teaching. And teaching is one of the greatest experiences for all sorts of reasons, which I could consume this entire interview with just that. So when the school unfortunately shut down in Switzerland, everyone's disbanded. Scott and I come back to LA, and it's like, okay, so what are we going to do now? And he started pursuing his dreams. And one of my dreams was to work in film. But again, that's kind of like the dream of being an actor. And also, we've been out of the country for a couple of years, and we were living in Switzerland, but before Switzerland, we were living in San Francisco. So coming back to LA, we had no contacts. There was no resources to just call up a friend and say, hey, I'd like to work in film. So it was consulting. We had another studio in Culver City. Scott started his vision of creating a publishing company called Design Studio Press, which has done quite well. And ironically, I'm involved with them today on a book that I'm working on called Beauty and the Beast. Subtle plug. But it's true. It's, all these things just kind of come together, and So when we were working in Culver City, we were also teaching at the original Art Center in Pasadena. And there was a guy named Phil Hedema who was also teaching there. And he was the head at the time. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but he was the head of Universal Studios themed
Themed entertainment,
something like that. I apologize, Phil, if you see this. And him and David Cobb, who was the main art director, I believe, of the Men in Black Alien Attack experience, they reached out to Scott and I to see if we could help design the vehicle for that ride, because we knew wheelchairs really well, which meant we knew the world of disabilities and access to the ADA Act, the American Disabilities Act. So we understood quite intimately the needs of a wheelchair user. So it made sense that we could be of value to developing that vehicle. However, it's Men in Black, and I'm thinking, ooh, creatures. Do they have anyone to design the creatures? I have no reason and no right to even ask to be involved with the creature design, because it's something I wanted to do, but I didn't have a portfolio and certainly no real experience. I just liked it. So, you don't get anything unless you ask. And I did just that. I said to Phil and Dave, hey, can I participate? So long story short, I was participating, but they did say, if you're going to be doing a lot of this creature work, you're going to need some help because there's a lot of creatures. So we're going to suggest to you a team of people. Carlos Swante being one of the first ones who designed a lot of stuff with Rick Baker on the Men in Black movie. And so why this is relevant is because Carlos then came to our studio in Culver City, and he brought his genius and his pencils and paper and started drawing creatures. And that's when I realized there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. I'm just not that good, because Carlos is really good. And then he said, hey, if you need more help, can I recommend a couple other people, such as Jose Fernandez, for example, incredible designer and sculptor of creatures, and Brian Wade and Jordu Shell and Jim Cagle. We needed a mold maker, Rob Freitas. We had all these people in our studio. And the point I want to make here is these are just some people that were recommended by other people. I did not realize that these were like the apex predators of creature design. They were the best in the industry. And they didn't realize that they were my mentors and teacher. So even though I was profoundly incapable of being as good as them, I was not intentionally trying to assimilate all of their skills, but I was paying attention, going, this is amazing. What pencil are you using? What kind of clay is that? How do you make those clay tools? And I learned so much from these. I became a creature designer because of these guys. Quite honestly. I really did. I learned a lot at Art Center, but it was specific to industrial design, not creature design.
Yeah.
The methodology and the philosophies of being an industrial designer really lent themselves to creature design for me. So where the launch point of truly becoming a creature designer was sort of when Jose Fernandez, the building that we were in, had a few other tenants down a few doors, and one of the tenants was a friend of Jose's, and he visited them and had lunch, came back to my studio, and then there was a knock on our door, and it was one of the people down the way that said, hey, Jose left his keys when he had lunch with us. And as they're handing me the keys to give back to Jose, they're looking in our studio going, hey, you guys design helmets. I said, yeah, we've been doing helmets for a while. Bicycle helmets, rock climbing helmets, a variety of different equestrian helmets. Mostly Scott Robertson was doing those. So they said, we have a project that needs a helmet. Would you be interested in helping out? And I thought, sure. So long story short, that project was Minority Report. And because of our experience as industrial designers and fabricators, we didn't make things that looked good. We had to make them function for the purposes of product design. So there were bicycles and wheelchairs and all sorts of other stuff that we got involved with on Minority Report. My claim to fame on that project were the three-finger gloves for Tom Cruise. And again, it was more of an industrial design approach that we were applying because that's what we knew. And the person that was knocking on the door was Colleen Atwood, who is, multi-Academy Award-winning, Oscar-winning costume designer. And that relationship rolled into working on Planet of the Apes. And I wasn't doing creature design. I was assisting in costume. But these projects are also interconnected with past relationships and experiences. And I started to have a tiny portfolio of creature design. And then a friend, sort of ex-student, James Klein, who is an incredible designer, he reached out to me because he knew of my interest in creature design. He said, "Hey, we're working on a film with this guy named James Cameron, who is working on currently Battle Angel Alita." This is now 22 years ago, I think. Good Lord.
Wow.
So fast. And he said to me, Jim's looking for creature designers for a new project called Project 880. If you have anything, send it over. I barely had anything, but I sent it over. And luck of the draw, I was invited to participate for a month or two with 3 other designers, Yuri Bartoli, George Ushel, who I'd known for a while, and a person who I was aware of and a fan of was Wayne Barlow. I was like, Wayne Barlow, oh my God. So the 4 of us worked at Jim's house in Malibu on Project 880/Avatar. And for me, that turned into a 3-year-long unplanned stint of designing all sorts of stuff, the film. But again, how things are so interconnected. One of the things that came up on that project, which relates to an earlier reference, was there's a guy in a wheelchair, if you are familiar with the story of Avatar. And I've always been sensitive to how disabled products are designed for movies and sci-fi. And so often they're designed without consulting the disabled community.
Mm.
And oftentimes then the result is a cool looking wheelchair that is ridiculous. And the disabled community look at it going, okay, great that you designed a sci-fi wheelchair, but clearly you're not asking us questions because it's stupid. And I really didn't want that to happen. So I left my lane of creature design and asked James Cameron if he'd be interested in me advising, which is a presumptuous thing to say. I can imagine his perception was like, what the hell are you talking about? Aren't you a creature designer? And I explained, I've got years of experience working directly with the disabled community, and I just don't want your production to fall prey to a misstep that is easily avoidable. So anyhow, ended up being a part of the wheelchair that's in the film. Why is that relevant? You just never know what your experiences can yield and where they can be useful. And more importantly, if I can offer a kernel of wisdom here, be vocal about yourself without being arrogant or presumptuous. But if you feel like there's something else you can bring to the table, mention it. It's up to somebody else to assess whether or not you're going to have value in that arena. But you just never know where things can go. So anyhow, that was kind of the beginning of me being a true creature designer in the industry. Was I welcome? I'm out of left field Nobody's heard of me in Hollywood, but here I am working on one of the biggest productions ever, and you don't know it at the time. You're just
Right.
working. You're just doing the work in the hopes that it gets greenlit and becomes a film, which it did, and now it's history. But yeah, that was the start of it. Long answer. I apologize. But
No, it's perfect.
that's what it
So,
was.
so I'm curious to ask you, like looking back on your career, you kind of had this dream and this vision that you sort of followed the path. Was there a specific moment or specific project where you felt like, oh, I've made it. Like now I'm in the industry and now I'm doing, what I've always wanted to do.
Well, I've never felt like I've made it. I've recognized that I'm getting paid to do it. I think there's been a few moments where I thought, wow, I'm living the dream. And where it feels like that is oftentimes when you're on set, for me, at least. When Avatar didn't feel like that because it was at Jim's house initially, so it didn't feel like you were working on a movie. It was a small group. And when we were on set, which was motion capture, performance capture, it also didn't feel like you're working on a movie. There were some amazing awarenesses that were had of, holy moly, I'm working on something really innovative here because of Jim. And that was incredible to be aware of that. But it was really Star Trek with J.J. Abrams that it felt like I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing I dreamed of. And it was not out of like arrogance of look at me, I'm doing it. It was just like, oh my goodness, I'm on set. Makeup artists have created creatures that I've conceived. There's the actors. There's the lights. There's the camera. Here's me. Wow, this is amazing. And that was Star Trek, the first one. I did not think this was going to last. I knew, because Avatar had not come out. It was going to be probably another year or so before Avatar comes out. So that was like, who knows what that's going to be. Star Trek, we're only starting, so I didn't know what that was going to be. And I also knew that it was Star Trek and there's this whole new timeline and whole new cast. Oof, that's a risky one.
Right.
And Cloverfield was in the can. I think it may have come out, but I was nobody. I was not recognized. So I've never had the arrogance of, check me out. I'm in Hollywood. I'm doing this stuff. I'm rubbing elbows with these actors and directors. Having been an actor, set the tone of at any moment, whatever fame you think you have, whatever opportunities you have, can disappear in an instant. And if you're a seasoned Hollywood worker, you recognize you'd better embrace the humble nature of these opportunities and go, I'm doing it now. Tomorrow I may not be doing it. So yeah, it was the first Star Trek where I thought, I'm doing exactly what I had dreamt of.
Yeah.
What would have made it a greater story is if it was Star Wars. Not because Star Wars is better than Star Trek. It's just
The full circle.
Yeah, that would have been a full circle story. It's like, dang it, I wish I had that story to tell.
Yeah.
And I almost did by when JJ was directing Star Wars. Like, JJ, I know that I'm here in LA working on other stuff for you, but if you have it in your heart to have me out, I don't need to work on it. I just need to stand and lean next to the Millennium Falcon. That's all I want.
Yeah.
But time did not allow. Oh, well.
So I'm curious, I want to kind of dive into your creative process a little bit. Can you kind of walk us through, like, in kind of, this is a very broad question, but kind of your general idea of kind of going from concept to completion. Obviously you're dealing in concepts, but your kind of initial idea and how you take an initial idea and that seed and bring it to the final creature.
It's easy to answer now because I've done it so many times, designing stuff. The subject matter of whether it's a wheelchair or a banshee creature or piranha, the fish in the movie Piranha, which is a piranha, It's all the same process. And my process is ever so slightly different. Maybe it's become more of a process today than before. Because before, you just kind of, in creature design and film, you sort of just start with the primal, the visceral. And oftentimes creatures, they've got teeth and glowing eyes and all the cliches that go with creatures. And you're trying to like create the narrative surface, emotional beat, where for me, not that that's a wrong way to approach it, but for me, I almost could not approach, like I had an inability to approach designing a creature that way because it just didn't feel, well, it wasn't what I was used to and what I experienced as an industrial designer, which is you get the brief, whatever it is, you're going to design a 4-seater sedan. Okay, let's talk about the market. Let's talk about the manufacturing. Let's talk about the goals of the company, the demographic, all these things before you start even putting pen to paper and drawing a shape. That's kind of what you are trained to do. And then in the design process, you might also be obligated to come up with features that, at least our experience designing products for the disabled, we were working for a company that intended to go public. So there's a whole design parameter, which is when you're designing these products, we need things that are patentable because the patent side of what we're going to be selling as a company is important. So when you're designing a creature, are you thinking of patents? No. But what I'm thinking of, because it's sort of the natural way for me to think, is what are the new things that theoretically could be patented, theoretically, but are features, are new inventive elements that make that product, a banshee, more valuable to the consumer, the audience watching it. Now, the features that I would be attempting to design into a creature are things that make the creature feel more fresh, more unique, whatever word you want to apply to it. So to achieve that, the only way to achieve that in the organic is in the same way that we do it in the man-made, which is you have to understand the thing it is that you're about to design. So if it's a flying creature, before I start drawing something with wings, I need to understand how big the wings need to be. Is it gliding? Is it flapping? Is it fast? Is it a slow albatross thing or peregrine falcon? And all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is much harder than I thought. I don't feel that it's harder, but it's necessarily going to require more effort if you're going to innovate. And that really is quite simply the philosophy behind the design process is know your material intimately. Don't know it just from observation. Don't just go to the museum and look at a bird skeleton. Understand what the mechanics are behind that specific bird skeleton and ingest it in such a way that it becomes part of your mental knowledge base and library. Because when you're sitting at your desk at 3 a.m. trying to invent, it's all in here and you're able to access it. This is a tiny bit of a departure, but if you are to use Google, and let's go fully contemporary, you're going to jump into using ChatGPT, AI, even just photo reference from the internet, you can quickly come up with visual solutions. But you're dependent on just grabbing this stuff and sort of mashing it up to create an image of a thing. If you approach it the way I like to approach it, which is get it in you. Don't just have it in front of you. Books open that show a cool image of a particular bird, cool palette of a poison dart frog, whatever the inspirations are. Get them inside of you so that your computer can access the information and coalesce and assimilate all this data into an intellectual result. So you're assembling it quickly in your head. And that's the difference between, the debate of why should I have to learn who the presidents of the United States are in history class when I can just pull up my phone and instantly access that data? Why should that be in here? And I understand that point of view. But the reason you want that stuff in there is partially if you don't have access to your phone or the computer or whatever. That's one reason. But two is because the speed at which you can access information that is not necessarily available to you. So I'm accessing birds because I've been studying them and I know about bird morphology. But I'm also wondering about the juxtaposition of combining a bird with feathers and a bat, a mammal with skin. But what if I involved a conch shell graphic to that? So those are things that, because it's all in here, you have access to that data.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not in there and you're sitting there thinking, well, there's nothing in my head, you type in the word B-I-R-D and you get a bird pop up, but you've never researched conch shells and that type of graphic design, or never thought about bats. You have to have all this data inside of you to kind of know to go to AI, ChatGPT, to ask it the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's why I think the more intelligent designers, the more capable designers are using their own brains to come up with this stuff. And I still believe that there's value in that process. So the most important thing that I think I've shared with you, at least from my point of view, is be smart about the data. Learn it intimately. And then once you understand it, and you've heard this before, when you know the rules, you know how to start to bend them.
Right.
Even break them to the point where things are still plausible. And that's how I approach all design. I attempt to become the most informed, because I'm being paid, hopefully well, to be the best at whatever it is I'm doing. So I better live up to the paycheck and be the best at it. The nice thing is over time, over years of acquisition of information, you become more efficient, which is always a help. You become a greater resource to yourself and the client, and you become better, and it becomes more fun because it's not as difficult to do. But tech changes and you have to adapt. So it's like,
Right.
Blender's on the horizon for me. It's like,
oh yeah, you're considering picking up Blender?
I have it. Do I know how to use it?
It's free, so you know.
I still only know 5% of Photoshop, 5% of ZBrush. So who knows where I'm going to take all this? But
yeah,
I'm
curious. I want to ask about that what you're talking about, and that's how do you kind of strike that balance between like biological realism with creativity and making something new that hasn't been seen before, especially in a sci-fi setting, especially when you're dealing with kind of an alien planet.
Well, the first thing to note, and I'm going to say this is my opinion versus a fact, even though I think it's a touch more factual, and that is there's an amazing book called Power of Limits. And that book talks about how everything in the observable universe is based on these limitations of physics and so on. And so because of that, things that are real are because of certain forces in nature, which is why we see so many similarities and parallels between creatures. And even in mutations, we recognize that, that's a cow with two heads. It's not going to live because of these unfortunate mutation scenarios, but it still feels plausible. So based on that, an audience who has no education in biology, they're going to be able to detect a bad design because primally, genetically, at our very base, we understand what works and what doesn't. There's a reason the golden mean, the golden rectangle, sacred geometry feel right. And it's because it's the only way it can be. So once you depart from that, once you start bending the rules, breaking the rules, you're getting closer to, it's not quite the uncanny valley of it, but it's a version of it where the rules have been bent so much that it's no longer really plausible or viable. So when a client says to you, which is inevitable, I want to see something I've never seen before, I know now that, well, you need to see something you've seen before, because if you've never seen it before, it means the audience has never seen it before, and there's a reason you've never seen it before, and that's because it doesn't work. It can be very creative, but the greatest designs are those that you recognize from a metaphorical point of view. It's lion-like, it's bird-like, it's shark-like, it's all these references. It's familiar in that regard, but it's brilliant. So H.R. Giger, people would say, and they mostly agree, he's one of the greatest unique designers out there. So take his xenomorph alien from the first Alien film. Totally brand new, totally unique. No, actually, it's humanoid.
Right.
2 arms, 2 legs, all the restrictions of a rubber suit. It's extremely unique in its surfacing, in its detailing, and some of the inventive qualities of the mouth coming out of the mouth, which, by the way, is a moray eel. So that's not new either. Whether he knew that or not is irrelevant. But the point is that most stuff, even the coolest stuff that's the most inventive to me, looks like something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the power of limits. That's the limitation of our ability to ingest something truly foreign and truly alien. Now, it might just be that real live aliens, depending on your point of view, are not even physical based. It's we can get into quantum and alternate universes and all these other things that are fascinating to think about. Not very interesting to draw. There's nothing to draw. So because of that, I find that unique design is based on what I said before, is educating yourself about all the greatest stuff in biology, all the greatest, the greatest hits of physics. And then you've got the tools to create something new-ish, something familiar with a twist. Because there's another utilitarian side to this, which is the narrative time that you have to allow an audience to understand what they're seeing. So if there's a creature in the dark, and usually any monster movie, even when it's about the monster, Cloverfield, although Cloverfield, there's some overt moments where you get a chance to really see it, but for the most part, we hold back. We tease. You don't get to see it. So when you do see it for a moment, it's important that the audience has the opportunity to ingest it. So if it's a quick moment, because the creature it's not a movie about a creature, it's a movie about characters and their experience with a moment. That communication needs to be clear. So if you, as a designer who luckily comes up with something we've never seen before, and it's a 2-second beat on screen, it may be an absolute failure because the audience didn't have the opportunity to figure out, am I supposed to be afraid of? I don't even know what I saw. Annihilation, great movie in a lot of ways.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, there's moments where it's like, what's going on here? What am I looking at? I don't quite get it, because it became esoteric and personal to the people creating the film. But for a designer, it's like, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's different. And did it work? I can't speak to that because it's subjective. But The utilitarian thing is sometimes you have to do a muscular thing with ivory teeth, pink gums, and glowing eyes because it serves the narrative. Your job as a designer is not to go crazy and be challenge your client too much with great design. It's like, okay, what's the story? What's the intent? All right, I get it. I'm being that industrial designer. I'm thinking, how much time is it have on camera? How is it lit? Let me talk to the DP. Who is the audience? Horror nerds who have amassed a whole bunch of stuff, and this is their expectation. Star Trek nerds, this is what they are familiar with. This is the language for Star Wars versus the language for creatures in Star Wars. Star Trek versus Star Wars. So it helps to be mindful of all of that. Then you sharpen your pencil and start to draw.
I'm curious because on just kind of touching on that point that you were talking about with kind of things being on screen very briefly. So that works really well for, say, the horror genre, because, there's this whole idea about how kind of what you can imagine is in some ways scarier than what you actually see. Because once you see something, okay, I could kind of compartmentalize it. The less I see it, the more it kind of leaves to my anxieties and imagination to kind of figure out and kind of and insert my own fears onto this creature.
Right.
But I'm curious, like in less of the horror genre where that applies, and you're dealing more with the sci-fi, like the Star Trek and the Star Wars, where people do want to see those creatures. Do you feel that same principle applies, or do you think it's less applicable there?
It comes down to what you're trying to do. The Star Trek aliens, which are typically just rubber faces and hands, to really simplify it. There's not a lot of creature design that happens in Star Trek where there's a monster out there. And if there is, it's not about that. It's about how those human characters and designed alien rubber masks and hands are interacting with the scene, with the story. So I feel like the job there is to create characters that you can spend the time watching, looking at, and listening to, and not being distracted by design because it's so much to look at and take in that it's like, okay, what did they say? I wasn't even listening because I was either I was looking at amazing looking design or I was looking at crappy design.
Right.
I was distracted. So let's assume that the goal is to create something really incredible. There's a limit as to what can be afforded on camera in terms of application time, the complexity of, like, let's pretend it's a porcupine person and they're in a show all day, all the time. Well, those quills and the application and the ease of the poor actor who has to eat and get dressed and all this stuff, all of a sudden, whatever the design is has to change because it's just not practically sustainable.
Right.
So you can have a walk-by kind of character that's pretty amazing and unique, but the one that's the day-to-day bread and butter character, it's important that from, again, a utility standpoint, it's repeatable, sustainable, I guess is the right word, really. So there's also a period of getting used to it for the audience. And think of it this way. You're introducing a character that you've been watching Star Trek, and I'll use that as a reference because it's a series that it lends itself to this answer. When you've gotten acclimated to a character with pointy ears, and then now you've got a whole new character coming on the bridge that's going to be there for weeks and weeks, and it's a very odd looking alien. Well, there's a period of time where you need to get comfortable with looking at them. And then if the design is good and the makeup is executed well and the performer underneath it does their job, you're so beyond what they look like. Saru, Doug Jones as Saru. You're just in the story now. So my analogy was going to be, it's just like everyone's gotten used to you coming to school every day, and then one day you come in with a haircut. And how many of us have gone through this experience? Probably every one of us. Not lately, but you come in with a haircut, and people are like razzing you because, oh, you got a haircut, you look different. And it's pathetic. But that's how we are, how you humans are. And it's similar to the alien thing in Star Trek, because when you first get a haircut, it's usually the first few hours, and then
Right.
everyone's over it. They've gotten used to you. And the same thing with, there's a new alien, or it's the old alien in a new costume. I was like, whoa, what are they wearing? Let's talk about it. And today is way worse than ever before, because people are just, I think we've discovered that people are crueler than we would have liked. And anytime anyone comes into the public domain with something different, people jump online and have some snarky ass remark to say. That's a whole different diatribe there. But the point being is that when it's new and different, it takes a moment to acclimate. But then once you've acclimated, you're not looking at the haircut, you're not looking at the alien, you're listening to the story. And that is what every person who's designing must always remember, is the story is the point, not the design. Sometimes the design is the point of the story, but once the design becomes the foreground and the conversation, then the narrative goes off the rails, and people, design is not as hard to access now. The cost of getting a designer, the volume, the numbers of people who are really good at designing stuff, the tools it takes to put a design on camera, that's less and less and less a factor. Visual effects.
Right.
There was a day when visual effects were only for the mighty. Now we can do it on our phones. What hasn't changed is good storytelling.
Right.
And the difficulty of crafting good story. So you can throw all the visual effects and all the great design and all the great fabrication at a production, but if you've got no story and no good lines, no good performers to speak those lines, then it's moot.
Yeah. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, I'm curious to ask you, obviously, you have a very successful career and everybody knows you for your amazing work, but what were some of the times that your career, that times that were struggles that you kind of had to get through, that maybe you thought, and I'm going to kind of give up on this, and just kind of challenges in your career where things didn't work out the way you wanted and expected them to, and how'd you get through that?
It's a great question, because that's the majority of my career. And I would imagine the majority of many others. Every production is typically unique, unless it's the same director with the same crew on a different production, different story. So working with J.J. Abrams on Cloverfield versus Star Trek versus Super 8, the experiences are pretty similar, because J.J.'s consistent. He has a similar crew. So it's that family that just goes from one different story to another different story. But those productions were not easy. I'm not saying they were bad. Other productions, there were plenty of other productions which were just plain old bad experiences. Usually not bad because the design process was bad, just bad because sometimes there's bad people that you're having to deal with. And it may not be the director or the producer, or it just might be the person you are stuck with in the art department who's like, why are you here? You're just a negative person or inappropriately competitive. Being a teacher, which is the core of, I think, who I am, somebody who wants to share the information, I'm always of the mindset of lifting one another up. So when you work with people that don't conduct themselves that way, I find it odd and difficult sometimes. So, there can be some really awful experience, and have been. There have been experiences where I wanted to quit the industry because of a consistent dynamic of certain people. So every production has its challenges, and the best of productions, like Super 8, love that experience. Loved it with JJ. He's always a treat to work with, and he's always so respectful and engaging. And the worst thing about JJ, and I've said this publicly before, the worst thing about him is he makes me laugh so much that I look like a fool because I'm always giggling in his company. I'm sure people are like, I don't know if I could take that guy so seriously over there. He's always laughing. So JJ, he cracks me up because he's a funny guy. But it's also what I love about it, so I'm sort of being silly. But even though the experience is positive and working with him is positive, what made Super 8 in particular so difficult was he was pushing to do something different, pushing me. And I felt like there were numerous times where I just wasn't delivering the goods. And I felt bad. And there was a time when I even said to JJ, I said, I don't know if I have the answer for you. You might have to move on, and that would suck. And thank goodness I remember him saying, no, you'll get it. You'll get it. Just stick with it. And I stuck with it, and he allowed me to stick with it and struggle to find the design for and with him. And again, that's the grace of working with J.J. Abrams. There are other people who would be like, you're right. You kind of suck. Goodbye. And I was like, well, and that's okay too. Honestly, design is subjective, and it is a process of elimination and a process of trying to find the design. I remember James Cameron once said, 2 years into Avatar, he was joking, but there was truth in it. He said to us, the art department, he said, do me a favor. Instead of trying to find the design, just do the design right away. And then we can save so much paper. And you realize, I remember in that moment, I thought, yeah, most of what we do every single day is fail. That sounds negative, and it is not. But you do a design, you pin it to the wall. Either you yourself look at it and go, that's not it, or the person who's hired you comes in and says, that's not it. They give you comments, you make the adjustments, you put that up on the wall. That's not it. Now, does that mean you're failing? Technically, yes. That's the process. You're getting closer to the intention, or closer to realizing, seeing what the other person is imagining that they either can't articulate because it's just not how they work, or they're discovering it as you go as well, together. And that, without experience, can be a very disheartening process, because it feels like, oh my God, I failed yet again. My design wasn't selected again. But then you realize that you're doing it alone in a room. If you're designing something for yourself, you're doing a personal project. It's not as if the first thing you draw is it. You draw it, you look at it and go, nah. And you refine it, try to perfect it. You're right. One could say, well, that's failing. That is the process. And the word fail has gotten a negative spin on it. But fail is the path to success. But it can feel uncomfortable. And a lot of these projects that are good experiences, you're still failing your way upwards to the solution. And and then there are other productions, no names mentioned because people don't need to be pointed out in this way. But there are some people, this industry, the majority of the people, Hollywood has a bad rap, and it's not fair. The majority of people that work in Hollywood are such good people, such hardworking, blue collar. They just want to create good stuff, whether it is a great breakfast burrito on set, a great set on set, a great design that goes on the set. We just want to work. And then there's just simply, I just need a job. I just want to have a job that I go to and I leave at work and I don't bring that job home emotionally, or I get to go home at a reasonable time. It's just a job. But part of the job that we do, particularly the more involved you are with the stuff that ends up on camera, that gets attention from the public, there's people out there that crave the attention, crave the accolades. Their purpose is to win an award, to stand up on stage and thank your mom or something. Those are the wrong objectives. But because those people do exist and poop floats to the top, there's a lot of people you have to deal with, but it's not the majority. There's a lot of people you have to deal with that are just so unsavory, and they become a challenge in your life. And the more that you aspire, and I've sort of aspired to this, I aspire to be at the top for one reason only, pretty much one reason. And that is so I have direct access to the primary voice. And I've been very fortunate to have achieved that. And again, it's not about at all, I get to say that I spoke to Steven Spielberg directly. It is to be the most efficient person to the person that's hired me, ultimately. So when you find that their information gets diluted through the game of phone, and then your answer to that information gets diluted because it goes back up, and then you all of a sudden find yourself asking the question of somebody who's the courier of the information. It's like, did you ask them the question? Oh, no, I didn't. It's like, but that's the question that I needed you to ask that would help me help them.
Yeah.
So when you have that experience in life on set, you want to say, can I just talk to them directly, please? That's not the hierarchy. And oftentimes it's just not the appropriate way to work. I unfortunately, or fortunately, started my career in Jim's house, talking to Jim directly, as did the other designers. That spoils you, but it gives you a taste of efficiency because you're talking directly to the person who's needing you to do exactly what it is you need to do. And when you have that experience, which is why I say I like to be working at the top, I'm just more of value. I'm more useful to that person. So why would you not want to be in my position of communicating directly? Here's the rub. You get to that position where you're talking directly to the person you need to talk to, and they're getting exactly what they need out of you, and it's sort of real time, if you will. There are others that don't like that. I come from a world of get the job done in the most efficient way possible. Industrial design world, working on products and automotive stuff. There's no BS hierarchy stuff going. Well, there's a little, but it's a little less ego oriented. So for me, it's not about getting to be the guy. It's about trying to, and I honestly feel this way. If you're giving me money for something, I had better be the most valuable person, which is on me, to make sure I'm informed and communicating. And there are others who did not like that dynamic that I had, that good fortune I had of being a genuine person with another genuine person. So there was a lot of abrasion at the very beginning of my career where people felt like, hey, I've never heard of you. You don't belong here. And I don't like that you're succeeding. And it's all this like, what? These are all ridiculous things you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm here to play with you and have fun and do what we've been hired to do. All right. But again, you let those people be who they are, and hopefully they'll let you be who you are. Often not the case. And just get the job done.
So let me ask you on that, kind of on that topic. So you've obviously had, obviously on top of the skills you have, you also had the good fortune of kind of being in the right place at the right time and meeting those people. Mm-hmm. Let's say somebody who's starting out at the very beginning of their career, how do you kind of position yourself to be the most useful to the job possible?
Well, the obvious answer is you got to have the skills. So you got to get educated, and you got to continue to become educated. Whether it's learning new tools, not just digital tools, but a particular pencil. Is graphite the right thing? Is a wax pencil the right thing? Is black on white paper the right thing? Is it colored pencil on dark tone paper? Maybe I should be using paint. Maybe it's Painter. Maybe it's Photoshop. It's knowing as much as you possibly can not only makes you diverse and employable because of that diversity. Can I say diversity anymore? I don't know.
We'll let it slide.
Okay. Thank you. But also it keeps you interested sometimes. Sometimes the same subject, the same intention, but drawing it in pencil just feels so much better to me that day. You're still communicating the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're still using a medium that's efficient. If I'm going to sculpt in ZBrush versus marble, well, marble might be fun, but it's not going to be as efficient. So you pick the tool to sometimes suit the right goal. But that goal might also just be shaking it up for you. It's like, I think I just want to draw, and I'm going to do this design in charcoal. And that'll be fun for me. It'll still communicate. But I'm sorry, ask me the question again, because I think I went off topic a touch.
Yeah, so the question was for people who, as in you've had this success and this ability to kind of talk to the top and to work at that level.
Yeah.
So for somebody who's just starting out in design, how do they position themselves in such a way to kind of have that same attitude that you're talking about of being the most valuable asset possible to the project?
Thank you for reminding me. So yes, the tools are the most obvious thing. Communication skills, being able to use your mouth and your intelligence to articulate what it is you can draw. Conversely, being able to draw in such a way that the image is completely self-demonstrative, because oftentimes you're not going to be there presenting your work. When you are there presenting your work, you need to be able to articulate it as an adult, intelligent person. So that's not a skill we're taught in art class. And I've been fortunate to sort of naturally be comfortable in a crowd. Having gone to acting school forced me, having done stand-up comedy. You want to talk about an icebreaker of becoming comfortable in front of a crowd. Those are things. I don't advise you become a stand-up comic. And I'm not going to say I was good at it at all, but the experience of doing it, of having the courage to put yourself on stage in front of a crowd of drunk people, that sets you up to pitch an idea to James Cameron. Not that he's drunk. I'm not implying that at all. I'm just saying an audience who's like laser focused on, what are you saying? Entertain me.
Yeah.
Those are good experiences. So continuing to develop the tools beyond the art tools, but the tools of communication will make you stand out and make you more useful. Knowing your role is an important thing too. Because if you think by hearing me say, oh yeah, talking to the director directly, if you go to your production designer who has hired you and you work for, and you say to them, yeah, today I'm going to need to talk to the director. You've stepped out of your lane. You've left your role. And you might even be delusional. And you might need to be told where your place is. Not that I'm a huge fan of WWF, but Stone Cold Steve Austin once said, know your role. And yes, profound proverb from
life lessons from WWF.
Yeah, which I worked for, which is the only reason I know that is because I worked for the WWF doing toy design. But it is important to play the role, play the character, if you will. Don't ever become political and disingenuous, and don't ever lose sight of opportunities of putting yourself out there. But it's important that you don't shoot yourself in the foot by asserting beyond the appropriate rules that are in place. You got to know the rules. You got to know how to read the room. And I entered Avatar for a month while I was starting my industrial design company. So I had nothing to lose. And for me, it was like, well, if you don't like me, then this works out well for both of us. We're not going to waste our time. Think of it like dating. Just be honest with me. Do you like me or not? Do you see value in me or not? And if you don't, please don't say, yeah, let's get together down the road again. It's like, no. Tell me right now. Is there a second date? I like you. Do you like me? No, I don't.
Right.
Oh, bummer. But thank you. Honesty.
Yeah.
So life is simple when you don't complicate it with politics and romance and all these other things, these constructs that we make up. If we're honest with each other in a respectful way, what a great tool to have working in Hollywood. And that makes you stand out too. But then there's how do I get ahead? I have aspirations of being, I'm choosing my words wisely here, being different than I am today. Not better. I think we should always aspire to be better. But when I say, I don't want to just be a designer in the art department, well, that's kind of rude because there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, but I've got bigger visions, bigger plans. Also kind of rude if you think about it. If the goal is, I've been a creature designer, but I've always wanted to be, depending on your motivations, to be that thing, it's probably okay. Doesn't mean you're better. I want to be the director. Okay. Why? Because I want to yell at an art department. Okay, bad motivation. I want to be in control. Okay, that's okay. Why? Well, because I have a story vision. I have things that are important to say and share, and I would like them to be very specific. So I need to be the voice. All right, then, go for it. Sounds noble. And then you put into motion those things that will hopefully get you there. But changing from the art department, because you've always wanted to be a production designer, you're a little closer to the source. That's a long journey, and it's a difficult hill to climb. If you want to be a director, maybe don't start as a concept designer. I've always wanted to be a director. Having been a concept designer has allowed me to, and I've directed, I've been fortunate that I'm able to say that now. It's allowed me to be a much better director, particularly director of an art department, because I have a different insight and a different respect. Having been an actor, not just educated as one, but also working, I have a nice, useful insight when I'm directing actors that's much more sensitive and conscious of what they're doing. I'm a lover of all facets of film. And having been fortunate to work sitting next to JJ, as an example, doing nothing but watching him work and everyone else work and being so interested in what's that person doing with that light? What's that person doing with that lav mic? What's that person doing with the oranges and granola bars? I watch it all because I know that each of these things is an important component of the final piece of art. And every bit of it is of interest to me. So having been in that as a person who would like to direct or produce, even to write stories, having that little bit of exposure and, dare I say, insight just makes you so much more valuable. And you almost have to just kind of do it and let it sort of manifest on its own. There's a bit of there's a proactive nature to it, of course, which is, well, I aspire to do it, so I'm going to do these things. But then there's a point where it's like, you can only do so much. now you just I've done the work. Think of it as fishing. I'm not a fisherman, so this might be a terrible analogy, but you've done all the things you need to do. I got a stick with a cord on it. Clearly, I'm a fisherman. And I put a worm on the hook. And I've gone to the place where I think the fish are. And I'm quiet. I cast my hook, whatever fishing people do. I picked a terrible analogy. And then you sit back. There is not much else you can do now, but just wait. I've done all the things I can do. And now, you know what? I've hooked the fish. Now the skills are in place. I know what to do. I'm reeling it in. I caught the fish. My preference is let him go. But in the world of getting a job or getting to the next level, you just prepare yourself for an opportunity, a bit of luck that may happen, and then you know how to engage in the storm of this luck.
Mm-hmm. That's very well put. On a little bit of a different note, it's the same vein, but a little bit different. And that is, I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on where you see the industry as a whole heading in the next number of years. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of different people, and one kind of trend I've noticed through multiple discussions at different levels of professionals is there seems to be kind of this evolution of kind of the big studios are losing the grip that they had, both in film and this also applies to video games. It's kind of across the board, and you're seeing a lot more of the kind of independent creator.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of there's more space for the independent creator,
mm-hmm.
and so it's almost like like a forest fire. When the big trees kind of burn down, all of a sudden the little sprouts start to come up, and I think we're kind of seeing that a little bit in the industry. I'm kind of curious to just kind of hear your thoughts on where you think things are heading in the next 5 and 10 years.
Wow, that is an impossible question. Where are you going to be 20 years from now? My answer is essentially that I do not know. And it's because there's so much, it's a combination. There's so much happening. And also, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question of because I simply am not informed. It's kind of like asking me anything about politics. I see it happening all around me. I see both sides being right and being wrong. But that information that's coming to me is coming from sources that you have to question the sources.
Mm.
So that goes true with Hollywood. Am I hearing this information from the source, whatever that is? No. I see what's popping up on Instagram based on my algorithm. I'm hearing people that I know in my echo chamber confirming that, oh, it's over, Hollywood's over. I know from direct experience that it is bad, that the work has disappeared. I know from direct experience that it's slowly coming back. I don't know where it will be. When I look at AI, which one must, if you're a responsible person, you must be paying attention to AI, its benefits and the negative impact. It's moving so quickly that I have discovered it's impossible for me to predict its positive and negative impact. I can speculate. Mm-hmm. I have dabbled with it. I have used it, never professionally because I haven't had a reason to, but I've used it because I feel like I need to understand what is this stuff. And I'm equally blown away by it and horrified. And every day, almost, just something new, some new evolution happening at such an exponential rate that it's just impossible for me to see where it would go definitively.
Yeah.
You didn't ask this directly, but will AI take over? Don't know. Will AI make us lose work and jobs? Sure. but AI will also give us jobs. And I can only speak from my contemporary viewpoint and experience of this. The transition of what's happened financially in the industry is beyond my intelligence and knowledge base. All I know is that the demographic of consumption of media is different today. Yes, one can say, oh, kids today don't have, they want everything now, and it's all short format and vertical. It's 9 by 16 versus 16:9. Okay, some of that's true. The demographic is changing. It always happens. The attention span, which sounds like a negative thing, it's just different. 3-hour movies are going to track well with a certain audience. 1.5 minute content, using that word intentionally negatively, is now a very consumable thing. And, I find myself sometimes leaning into the, get off my lawn kind of mentality. And other times going, you know what, I'm going to get on the lawn with the kids because I need to be there if I'm going to be a part of this. I'm an older guy now, but I think I have a young mind and a young personality and a young propensity. So I'm good with attempting to be relevant in the transition and the trajectory of where things are going. So what am I doing? I am proactively, intentionally paying attention to what's happening in the hopes that I can participate with value in what's going on. As an educator, maybe that might be the only area that I end up being of value. But it is something that all I can do. I can't bring up names because it wouldn't be fair to them, but I work with people who are working in AI. When I say I work with, I speak with. And we have this conversation a lot. And the conversation is, what do we do? AI is here. It's here to stay. It's going to displace. It's going to enhance. It's going to eliminate. What's going to happen? And my attitude is, knowing that it's not going away, to look away as if it doesn't exist and as if it's not going to affect me, for me is ignorant and for me is irresponsible. So then I think about, well, what have I done in my life as new things came up? Photoshop happened when I was kind of like when I graduated. ZBrush then happened. Now I know that people are like, that's apples and oranges, Neville. That's not the same as AI. The version I'm speaking of is. I'm not talking about the criminal side of AI. I'm not talking about the scraping and all that stuff. That's bad and we know it. I'm talking about the creative use of something that's more efficient and better than us in a lot of ways. ZBrush does things that we cannot do, at least in the speed that it does it. Symmetrical sculpting. I usually sculpt symmetrically when I was doing real clay work. So I sculpted symmetrically. Didn't mean it was ZBrush symmetrical.
Yeah.
You had to know how to use an armature. You had to know what clay to use at what temperature or at what moisture level. There's all these factors with real sculpting. ZBrush, you don't have to know that at all. A person who has never had that education is doing stuff that you could never have done. It's like, oh no. Well, that's not real sculpting. That's not real art. Whatever. It is now industry standard. It has happened. So if you didn't embrace it, and if you still feel that way, again, I feel that that's, for me, it would have been ignorant and irresponsible. So here we are at a massive transition. What can I do? And I don't know the answer to what's going to happen 5-10 years from now. What I do know, I think, having talked and debated with like minds and contradictory minds, I can do what I've done before, and that is, as an educator, pay attention to it, try and figure out its value to us, the art design community, and sort of be a shepherd as to how it moves forward. So rather than ignore it, let me really get in there and maybe even be deeply associated, possibly with some AI companies, so that they understand, because maybe their motives are less about art, more about commerce. Understandable. Almost all products are that way. But if I can be a respected, useful individual to an AI company, to where I can be a voice for us as artists and guide them into creating a product that really does benefit us as artists and the community as consumers of the art, that's a good way to be involved with AI, as opposed to just letting it become this bad thing.
Yeah.
But a conversation I had with a very young kid about AI, and as an analogy, it's like a rock on the road is just a rock until someone picks it up and does something with it. One person, being a certain propensity, throws it through a window. Another person picks it up and carves it into something beautiful, or uses it as a tool to create something with. It does come down to the user. There will be awful people that currently are using AI in bad ways. And there are amazing people using AI in incredibly good ways. So I want to be one of the people that pays attention to AI and attempts to guide it into the world of positive, simultaneous to those that will not. But it would be a shame to ignore it and have just a bunch of people using it ignorantly at best, and at worst with intention of doing bad things.
Yeah.
So my answer is
Well
not
said.
one of specificity as to what's going to happen, but rather trajectory as to what my intention is to the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Usually at this point, I usually ask the same question to all my guests, and that is, I'll pose the question, and then I have a little bit of a different version if I want to ask you. And that is, I usually ask, how do you define success? But for you, I want to change it up a little bit, and I want to ask, what's the sort of legacy that you hope to leave behind?
The legacy could be the success, I guess. That answer, the question is different today than it would have been 10 years ago, partially because of having a child. You can start to see things differently, although having a child didn't change me and my perceptions too much. What has changed me is observing the world and sort of gathering the statistical data in a very loose way of just seeing the habits of human beings today. My legacy is to have had an impact. To say on the world is quite lofty, but I'd like it to be global. I'd like it to be in high numbers, but I'd like to have had impact on at least a group of people that can then have the same impact, and then it's a growing thing. And I'm going to use a word that isn't being embraced as much as it should, because it's sadly political. But I want people to become more empathetic to others. I want I want my legacy to be a reference point, because I'm working on it with myself, and I practice this. If you like what I do as an artist, if you like what I do because I was associated with Avatar and therefore I have a voice, I was on a TV show called Face Off, therefore I have a voice. If you like me because of that, maybe you'll hear me I'm not going to try and change your mind, but I'm hoping that because you maybe like me enough to listen to who I am, not to what I want to change you into being, but it might be that you go, I hadn't seen it that way before. My art, my aspirations as an artist are irrelevant in terms of a legacy, unless that art can get people to look at their neighbor and be more compassionate through a movie, through a creature design, through the book I mentioned earlier, The Beauty and the Beast. The Beauty in the Beast book, which has been a long time coming. It's a Kickstarter campaign, and this is relevant to your question. This is not a plug, but it is. That book is answering the question you just asked. In it is educational content on how to draw, how to design, a lot of stuff we've been talking about. But a big part of the book is also how to be in this world of entertainment design. And if you choose to see it in the book, how to be in this world, because the parallels are identical. If you want to be a good designer, get the tools. If you want to be a good person, get the tools. Practice those tools. And the reason I say that today's climate changes my answer to that question, because there's so much anger and so much lack of vetting what you hear, and so much ignorance occurring. And I've fallen prey to it too. You see something pop up on the internet and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe. Well, let's think about what you just thought. You can't believe because you know what? It turns out it wasn't true. So you got to question every piece of information that comes your way. And you got to be more empathetic. I'm not going to tell you my political view, not because I'm afraid to, but because it's irrelevant. What is relevant is being open to the other side and hearing what they have to say so that collectively you can arrive at an answer that benefits everyone. We are so divided. And we can say we're divided. You know this because you live in it. There's a whole scenario going on over there. I'm in America. And there's a whole division happening here. And it's global. And there's wars happening. And it's like, wow, man, are we really that bad? And then I come to, well, it's a perspective that the human race currently has always had, but it seems so much more agitated. It's as if the scab has fallen off of this wound that we possess, and everyone's just this raw nerve that's reactionary. And that transcends into, let's just say, a movie's coming out, and people start responding online to the thing they do not know with strong opinions about it. Oh, it's going to be such a terrible movie because so-and-so is in it. Oh my God, I can't believe they're doing another remake. Oh my God. And you watch all of this negative, ignorant commentary, and it bums me out. Partially because when you see it, you're going to be like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Turned out it was okay. Actually, you know what? I love it. So that was a waste of energy just for that person individually. It's like you spent so much time and energy, even if it was just one sentence online. Why? Because mostly you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't vetted it, specifically this film that might be coming out, this game that might be coming out. And that's the small stuff, you know? What we do is not that important in the scheme of things. So my hope is that my legacy, quite honestly, is someone could look back at Neville Page, and that includes my son and family, and they would either garner some of the tools that they see that I've been trying to develop for myself. They're not new tools. I'm talking about tools like empathy, compassion, and how that applies to being in the entertainment industry, how that applies to having a child, how that applies to having a neighbor, how that applies to how you travel, how you treat other, whether it be any other. The whole list of other that's being marginalized, that have no impact on our lives. I'm getting political now. But I think it's critical that we start to put these energies that are put into being critical. Just take that energy, whatever that is, that fuel, that gasoline that drives the car into a brick wall, to drive that same car slowly down a wonderful road to some place. It's the same fuel that we're using to get all pissed off about things. Well, there's not a gay person on the planet that's going to ruin your day in this political sense. There's not a transgender person that you're probably ever going to see in your life. Just don't worry about it. Focus on being better to the world. And if I can convey that in a way, if I can prove that, ergo convey it, that is the greatest legacy I can imagine. I have a boy, 2 boys. I would like these boys to be raised like real men. Well, let's define men, which I will not now. But what I want that to be is a person who is of value to the planet. Truly of value, which I know is subjective. So the legacy starts with those 2 guys. And anyone that's listening to this will hopefully at least see my motivation as being in the right place. You might disagree with my specific points of view, and that's fine, but let's be open. Rather than you turning off this podcast, rather than you going, okay, it's time to send Neville some hate mail because he's an ignorant person, I would like, and I welcome it too, I would rather have people that do not agree with me not unfollow me. I don't unfollow people that get aggressive with me online. I do the opposite. I try to engage in a way of saying, hey, totally get it. You think I'm these expletives, but let's talk about it. Because I'm calm enough and I don't take it personal to where it's like, and I've had these conversations in success where it's like, I'm not going to block you. I also don't have enough time in the day to engage with everyone that hates me. But what I find is once you shut that door, you delete that person from your account, because we're talking the contemporary world, you've deleted counterpoint to you. And you've created your own echo chamber, your own ignorant place to live within. So when if we all just got along, if we all engaged in mature dialogue and we're open to another person's point of view, not with the goal of changing one another, but with the goal of hopefully you can hear me so you understand me and you understand what that means to you. That's a start. Yeah. That's the goal here. That's ultimately where I would love to be in the last 20 years of me creating stuff, assuming that I got 20 years of productive engagement. I would love to be able to have my stuff, and I'm working on it. I truly am. Everything that's cooking right now behind the scenes, including the book, is all stuff that I'm not trying to create legacy. I'm not trying to do this. I just know that anything I do, I'm not going to waste my time on a story, on a project, on a film I take on, unless I feel like it has value, true value to people.
Yeah.
So there's the answer.
Very well said. Thank you so much for your time. I can't thank you enough. I mean, this is not only a pleasure, but a real honor to have you on.
Oh, you're very sweet.
I can't thank you enough for your time. Where can people find you online and social and website and all the good stuff? Kickstarter.
The usual. I can be found on Instagram, just my name, Neville Page. Twitter, I don't use it a whole lot. X, rather. Facebook, I'm barely there. I'm not that active, quite frankly. My website is nevillepage.me, which is a thing that's in construction, but you can pop by and take a look. The Kickstarter campaign It is NevillePageKickstarter.com. That'll take you to the whole Beauty and the Beast book campaign. So that I thank you for allowing me to include that. And hopefully you'll get on board with what I'm doing. I would like to think it's things that could be of interest, perhaps, of value, potentially, in terms of legit educational content. And then with a bit of luck, there'll be some more things to reveal down the road.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Likewise.
Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.